Hey guys, Vincent here from thecreativedojo.net. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at how to create a Galaxy Nebula within Trapcode form in After Effects. So it's going to be a very interesting tutorial. Before we get started, I just want to thank our sponsors over at Squarespace. Squarespace is the only one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional online website, store, portfolio. For a free trial and 10% off, head over to squarespace.com and use the promo code DOJO9. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be creating today. So it's a very nice little scenic animation here, and it's pretty cool how we create this using purely After Effects and plugins for After Effects, because usually you would create something like this using a 3D application like 3ds Max, where you have more flexibility with the particles and rendering and stuff like that. So pretty neat here. We're primarily going to be using Trapcode form for this, so make sure you have that, version 2 specifically. And we will also be using a few other Red Giant products and optical flares. So let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. Let's go ahead and create a new composition, and we'll call this Nebula, 15 seconds long at 720p, and we will hit OK. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the assets I have here. I have a few images here from NASA. These two images here are in public domain, which you can freely use for your projects, and you can download them in the tutorial package assets down below. But I'll also link to the full website where you can download a few other images in the galleries at NASA, so check it out. The links will be down below. I also have a space background that I created in Photoshop, and a spiral.obj, which is nothing more than a 3D model of a spiral that I created in Cinema 4D. This is what it looks like here, and although the nebula is not going to look like this is going to give us the general shape of the nebula, which is kind of hard to create in After Effects by itself. So this will help a lot, and you will need Trapcode form version 2 to support OBJ files here. But again, you can download this in the description down below. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drag our space background in, and we will make it a 3D layer. Hit F4, toggle 3D switches. We'll push it back in Z space, and we'll scale it up just to kind of create a parallaxing effect between objects that are close to the camera and objects that are further away from the camera, such as the background here. We'll also drag in our spiral OBJ, and because this is a reference layer, we don't need to see it, so we'll just shut off the eyeball switch here for the visibility. And we'll also do the same for this image right here, which is going to be our reference image for the color. So we'll just call this color map, and we'll be using this image here to display or tell form what color to use for the particles here. So we'll just shut that off as a reference layer, and let's go ahead and create our form layer. So we'll hit Control Command Y to bring up a new solid, and we will call this one main particles, and we'll apply effect Trapcode form. Now you're noticing that I'm using form in this tutorial. In a previous tutorial I used particular, and that was just a mess, although it did look pretty good. I think this is a better solution for it because particles are more static and we don't have to worry about time remapping, and it supports OBJ files. So we'll go into the base form, we'll tell form to use an OBJ model, and in the OBJ settings we'll tell it to use our spiral.obj file. A cool little feature here is the skip vertex, and that will allow us to kind of reduce the number of vertex. So this is kind of like the number of particles in our case here. So we control the number of vertex, which also controls the number of particles. So something pretty cool. Now to have better control over this nebula here, let's go and create a 3D null object. So layer new null object. We'll make it a 3D layer, and we'll call this controller. We'll hit R to bring up the rotation properties, and we'll just parent the X, Y, and Z rotations form to these controller nulls here. So we'll hold down Alt or Option and select the X rotation in form, and we'll just pick whip it to the X rotation in the controller. We'll copy this expression here. We will apply it to Y, change the X rotation to Y rotation here, and we'll just paste the same expression to the Z rotation and change the transform in Z X rotation to Z rotation here. So now the rotation of form is controlled by the controller null here. So we can just rotate it. As you can see, it rotates the whole thing here. So we'll just rotate it and give us an interesting little angle here. And let's go ahead and go back to form and go ahead and increase the size in X and increase the size in Y a little bit. So we have this kind of large space here. We can also change the size in Z, and that will give us an interesting look here. So we'll just keep it pretty low at 400 or so. And as you can see, it doesn't really look like a nebula yet, but we do have the general shape. So I'm going to go into the skip vertex option here, and I'll set it to around 20. So we just have fewer particles. We'll go into the layer maps and tell form to use the color from our reference image here, so our color map. So now the particle colors are based on our image map. And we'll go to, let's see here, we'll go into the disperse and twist. We'll change the disperse from 0 to 10, so it kind of just scatters the particles apart. I'm not sure you can see it in this small video player here, but we'll set it to full for now. So here we have our particles. We'll go into the fractal field, and we will go ahead and increase the effect size by 1 and the effect opacity by 10. And that's really going to influence the opacity and size based on our fractal field here. And then we can displace our particles. I want to set it to around 100 so that we have kind of this turbulent, kind of stormy look. So it'll look a little bit more organic, kind of like gas. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and forgot to change the evolution to 0. We don't want any evolution in this case unless you want evolution, but I doubt you would want that in this kind of large gassy space here. And then we'll just duplicate the main particles, and we'll call it small particles. And we will go ahead and change some of this stuff up. So we'll change the disperse from 10 to maybe 15, and we'll change the displace to maybe around 80 or so. It kind of just fills in the other gaps here. And we'll go into the particle here, and we'll change the size from 1 to maybe around 0.6 or so. So we have smaller little particles. We will apply a glow effect to these. So select the glow and just drag it into the main particles and adjust the threshold a little bit. And we'll copy this glow and paste it into our small particles, just so we have some more visible particles to see and work with here. So this is going to be kind of like our little specks of stars, I guess, in our nebula, kind of little specks of particles. Now let's go ahead and create the kind of energy effect that you would kind of see around a nebula, the kind of cosmic energy wave that you would see. I'm assuming, I'm not an astronomist, but it looks pretty cool. So we'll delete the glow for now. We will go into the particle size for the energy. We'll set it to 2. And let's just rename this to energy. And we'll go to effects and presets. We'll search in vector blur. And we'll drag the vector blur effect onto our energy form effect. And we'll crank up the amount to 500. And I just want to solo this energy layer here so we can see what we have. So I want to increase the ridge smoothness just so it looks like it's kind of like a lightning effect. So really crank it up high, turn around right there, and then we can play around with the map softness to kind of fine tune it. But the goal is to kind of create this kind of lightning effect. So we will hit F4 to bring up the transfer modes. We'll set the transfer mode from main particles to add, and we should unsolo this. We'll set all these to add, so small particles to add and energy to add. So now you can kind of see our energy wave here, and if we just shut the energy off and on, as you can see, it kind of just fills in the gap. And what we need to do is we need to change some of this stuff up. So we'll increase the displace to 120 or so, just so we have it in different places here. And maybe we will increase the opacity randomness, and that's looking okay. And maybe we can skip the vertices maybe to around 25, and that's looking okay. I want to duplicate the energy one more time, and this time we'll just increase the size a little bit just so it's a little bit larger, kind of like the energy's flowing out here. And we'll increase the size randomness and play around with some of that stuff. And we will go ahead and make sure that these particles have some size randomness to them, because we don't want it to look a little bit too static. So we'll go into particle here and change the size randomness up. something like that. This is looking a little bit more interesting. We kind of have that cosmic energy around here. We have some particles. This is looking somewhat decent. So it's all a matter of fine tuning now. So let me go ahead and change the controller angle just so we have a better view of what we have here, because this is not a very accurate representation of what I want to see. Alright, so we have something like that. That's looking okay. Let's go ahead and go into the main particles and change the size to maybe 0.8. And then I want to apply a star glow effect to the main particles here. And you don't really see anything happen because we need to play around with the threshold. So we'll just decrease the threshold, and that will tell star glow, okay, so how bright do you want me to select particles to show the star glow effect here? So we're setting the threshold to around 50 here, so only these bright areas have the star glow effect applied to them. And we'll go into the color map A. We'll set it to one color, and we'll set that one color to kind of like this purple bluish color here. And then for the color map B, set it to one color, and we'll set it to kind of like this hot red color, like that. Maybe we'll decrease the threshold even more, and then we will use a boost light to kind of show it, and then we'll just decrease the streak length to around 12. So we have something like that. Now it's looking a little bit more interesting. I want to go ahead and apply a glow to the energy. So I'll apply the glow to energy, the first one here, and we'll leave it at that, but we will also apply a curves effect onto energies, and we'll just add some contrast here, and we'll make it a little bit more blue, just because I think we need a little bit more blue in here. So right now we just have kind of like this cosmic dust, and I want to fill in some of that gap with a flare here, so we'll call this flare, create a new solid for that, and we will apply optical flares by Video Copilot. Now you can use No Light Factory, you can use a solid with some mass, but using a lens flare plugin just makes it a little bit faster. I'll select a preset here, and I know that the default position coordinates, because we haven't changed anything really except for the rotation, I'll set it to 640 by 360, but again you want to play around with it depending on where your nebula is. We'll set it to add, and we'll place it down here, and we'll apply a fast blur to it, and we'll also apply a curves effect. Repeat edge pixels here, so let's go ahead and increase the scale to maybe around 125, and then increase the brightness a little bit, but also increase the blur so we don't have that giant hot spot too much. And then we'll just add some contrast here, so just kind of bright areas is what we want here. Alright, so let me go ahead and again adjust the position of the nebula. So right now we have something that looks kind of interesting. I'm going to shut off the flare for now, and I want to work on the kind of atmospheric gas around the nebula, and we can do that by duplicating our energy here. Place it underneath everything, and let's see here, we'll just close the main particles, and we'll call this smoke, and we will go into the skip vertex here, and we'll reduce the particles down to around like 90 or so. So fewer particles here. Fewer, we'll change it to maybe even 100. As you can see, the particles are reduced. We'll crank up the size to around 45, and we'll change the transfer mode from add to screen, and we will go ahead and first of all change the particle type to cloudlet, and then we'll reduce the opacity to around 0.2 or so. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and increase the size a little bit, and I will also go into the effect opacity, set that to 0, because that's altering our opacity here, and I want to change the effect size to around 2, and then we'll increase the displace from 15 to around 30. So that will kind of give us this kind of misty energy effect, and we will unsolo this. And as you can see, with it off, we have something like this. With it on, we kind of have this hazy thing around it, and we'll increase the size even more, just so it's kind of like on the outer rim of this whole nebula thing. There we go. And then we'll duplicate it one more time, and we'll put this down here. We'll set this to maybe screen or something, and let's go ahead and play around with the curve. So maybe for this we can make it a little bit more blue, because this is kind of like this purple mess right now. So we'll just pull up blue, and we will increase the greens a little bit to introduce kind of this bluish tint, and we'll just play around with the red, just so we can have this blue mystic field around there. And right now they're all the same, so we need to go ahead and change the size to around 35, increase the dispersion to around 40, so we have some variation here. And then now if we enable our flare, it looks just a little bit nicer, and we can go ahead and reduce the brightness to around 110. And then let's go ahead and do a quick grade. So we'll go to Layer, Effect, New Adjustment Layer. We will apply Magic Bullet Looks here, or now part of the color suite, not really Magic Bullet anymore. We'll go to Edit, and we will go to Looks and select a preset. Now there are tons of presets you can choose from, some that give you some very interesting looks here. I'm just going to select the Subtle Film, and I would just go ahead and decrease the number of contrast here, and just lower down the midtones just a little bit. And we'll hit Finish, and we will also bring in Mojo and drag that in, and we'll just push down the punch it so there's less contrast. We'll play around with the balance here to kind of give it a blue tint, and then play around with the warm it here, so you can really tint it to whatever you want. So I'll just leave it something like that, and we'll just call this CC. Now for the flare, I may want to just blur it out a little bit more. It's a little bit too intense here. And then we can create a new adjustment layer, and then we can apply Trapcode Shine to this, just to give it a very subtle shine to everything. So we'll place it here, and we'll just put it below our CC adjustment layer. We'll set the transfer mode from none to add, and we'll set the source point down here or so. And it already looks pretty cool. And we'll change the colorize from 3 color gradient to none, so we'll use the original colors here. And then we will decrease the ray length a little bit, and then we'll decrease the shine opacity to maybe 20% or so, just so it's very, very subtle here. And things are a little bit blown out, so let's go ahead and fix that. Mostly because of the flare, so we'll just decrease the flare brightness. So before we go any further, I want to thank our sponsors over at Squarespace. Now, if you ever wanted to build a professional looking website for your business, Squarespace is the place to be. They make it extremely easy and quick to set up an online presence, allowing you to pick from over 20 highly customizable and professional design templates. With their click and drag visual interface, adding content is extremely fast and efficient, allowing you to focus more on your content and what you love instead of worrying about the technical stuff. They have an awesome 24-hour support, and starting at just $8 a month, you can get a free domain if you sign up for a year. You can start your free trial by going to squarespace.com, no credit card required. Now, when you do decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code DOJO9 to get 10% off the life of your order and support the dojo. Squarespace, everything you need to create an exceptional website. So now that we're back, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that we can do to finish this thing and tweak it up a little bit. So I'm going to go into the energy layers here and hit T on the keyboard, and I just want to tone down the opacity. We may have just a little bit too much energy here, so we'll just tone it down maybe around there so it's more particle than energy. We can also adjust the glow, because sometimes the glow is just a little bit too much here. So I'm just going to go into the main particles here and reduce the star glow maybe from 12 to 10. And we will also go into the star glow opacity and change it to maybe around 75 or so. That should reduce some of it. We can also go in here and reduce the glow intensity. And then back to our flare, we can just add some more contrast to the flare so we get some more refined. Let's hop into the smoke layer here, and we will just add some more contrast to that. Now lastly, I want to go ahead and finish this off by adding a few other images here, particularly this one here. We'll drag this image down below, right above our space background here. So this is another image by NASA. We will go ahead and change this transfer mode from normal to, let's say, overlay. And this will overlay that image on top of our space background. We want to make sure that this is a 3D layer as well. And we'll push it back in Z space. And we'll just scale it up, same way as before. It will change the rotation here from 0 to 90. And that will just flip it over. And just by moving it over here, we can get an interesting look. We'll duplicate it, and we'll just drag it over here. And then we can go into the opacity, maybe set it to around 60% for both of them. And then we'll just make one more copy. We'll rotate it maybe negative 90 degrees. And we'll change the transfer mode from overlay to maybe screen. And we'll just reposition it somewhere here. And this image will really help sell the effect of this kind of mystical, really gassy like substance here. So we'll change the opacity from 60, we'll tone it down to around maybe 30. And as you can see, that really adds a lot of atmosphere and kind of gas texture to everything here. We'll add a curves effect to that, and we'll just add some contrast to kind of really refine it here. So we have something like this, and if we just do a quick letterbox, and just like that, we get a really nice kind of colorful particle result here. It looks very, very nice and colorful for After Effects here, and it's pretty fun to create. Of course, it doesn't look as good and refined as the final result here, where this one is more of a more realistic effect here, and you can see that we have more of this spiral effect going on here. But of course, you can do the same thing with this effect here. Just play around with the dispersion rate, the displacement, as well as the size in X and Y and Z. And you should be able to pull something that looks very similar to this. But essentially, I give you the basic idea on how to kind of create the energy effects, some of the particle effects, the lighting effects, and how to just set this up using an OBJ. Again, the links for that will be all in the description down below. And don't forget to switch to 16 bits to get a lot nicer glows like I am right now. Of course, since this is Trapcode form, you can actually animate this using the camera. You can build in a camera, add some depth of field, or you can control the rotation of the nebula or galaxy by going to the controller here. Hit R, you can control and keyframe the rotations of the nebula here. So this is all in 3D space, our background's in 3D, the nebula particles are all in 3D, everything's in 3D, including the lens flare. So definitely check it out, play around with it. That's pretty much it, guys. This is how you create kind of the basics of a nebula kind of gas substance within After Effects in Trapcode form. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. I'll get to them as soon as I can. But once again, guys, my name is Vincent Wynn from the Creative Dojo, and I'll see you guys next time.